Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University. Welcome to Outrider 41, Success and the Academic Career Narrative. Let me tell you how we got here. I got a request to enact this particular project because we had a wonderful student who wants to remain anonymous, who keeps going into seminars and presentations and milestones, and she's feeling like she's not good enough because all these incredibly confident people are presenting how wonderful they are, how successful they are, how fabulous they are, and she's finding this very difficult to do. She's feeling like a pretender, and so she's asked me if I would offer her some assistance and think about what her academic career narrative could look like. So she's going into these sessions with a bit more confidence. Very happy to do that. And of course, for those of you that know this particular literature, this is basically Goffman 101, okay? This is the presentation of self stuff. So who we are as a human, our authentic, real self as a being, and then how we perform that particular presentation of self, the narratives that we construct for the consumption of others. And there's often a very, very big gap between those particular stories. Now, this narrative, this presentation of self that we configure, so often is based on fabrications, on lies, on marginalisation, on omissions. It's certainly an omission of failure. Failure is cut away from these narratives to render us robust and important and terribly significant. But of course, what we're leaving out is the collaboration that we've enacted with others, our deep partnership, perhaps how we've exploited other people, ridden on the coattails of other people, or claimed other people's success, or indeed overclaimed our role in it. So we have a new literature in this field as well, which is the reason why I went, yes, let's do this really difficult outrider, because we've got some new and, can I say, quite problematic literature to, inverted commas, help us or not. But I want to start with two stories of academic success that actually happened to me in the last 3 years. They are my stories to tell, and let me show you what these look like and the damage that these stories do. I want to show you today the cost and the consequences of fabricating a version of ourselves, and how these academic narratives that are being constructed hurt actively other people. So let's look at the rationale and the consequences of these particular success narratives. As we talked about in our series, Use the Difficulty, our wonderful trilogy, we talked about the stress that literally tens of thousands of people around the world are under because they're pretenders. They have underperformed through their academic career. They still exist in universities. They're being promoted in universities. They've been given titles, vanity titles or otherwise, but they know they are a pretender. And so they are walking through daily academic life frightened that they're going to be found out. Remember, we've also got a large group of people who have had a very easy ride through academic life, through patronage or dial-a-mate appointments or internal promotions, internal appointments when there supposedly wasn't a field. Again, tens of thousands of people have been promoted and got on in this way. So what do you do if you're one of these pretenders with a big title? And of course, this is a time when we've got all these proliferating metrics, so there's all this evidential-based triangulated data sets which actually verify that you are a pretender. Now, this would be a pretty stressful way to live, I reckon. But therefore, noting that stress and noting why people do this, and it's understandable, let me share with you my two academic career narratives. And these are stories that happened to me. One happened in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the other happened in Canada. So let's firstly cross the Tasman. A provost and a dean of graduate research organised a 30-minute Teams meeting with me. I didn't know what the point of this meeting was. I didn't call it. I wasn't interested in going, but because I was being polite, I accepted and went to this meeting. Now, both of these people were women. and both had and have underperforming research and teaching and learning careers. They shouldn't be anywhere near a professorship, and they certainly shouldn't be anywhere near this level of seniority. So these two organised an online meeting with me for 30 minutes, and I was not terribly interested in them or the meeting, but I was there. Now, the provost started the meeting and spent the first 10 minutes telling her academic career narrative, making very, very tiny decisions and issues and events incredibly significant and big, making very tiny little research things incredibly enormous. And this went on and on and on and on, a monologue for 10 minutes. It was absolutely ridiculous. And I kept my microphone off and I just sort of stared at the camera like this, right? Okay, so 10 minutes, she's done. This went on and on. It was just embarrassing, right? Just embarrassing. And then she handed over to the Dean of Graduate Research, who then proceeded to do the same thing and present her academic career narrative for 12 minutes. Tiny little things becoming incredibly important, like she'd won a Nobel Prize, right? Went on for 12 minutes. So now we've got 8 minutes left in this meeting, and I still don't know what the point of this meeting is, right? What are we doing here? Now, at this point, with 8 minutes to go, the provost asked me to introduce myself. So I demuted the microphone and I said, look, there are thousands of sites and websites and lots of information about me online. If you're interested in that information and my research, teaching or learning career, it's there for your consumption. And I remuted myself. Now that created a fair amount of confusion in the meeting. There was tittering and people were unstable and the two of them didn't really know what they were doing, and they stammered and they tried to regroup themselves, right? Because I would not participate. My narrative is not your business. Okay. And then the provost started talking again, stating, finally the reason for the meeting, stating that they wanted me to deliver professional development training to their staff and to their students. And they then immediately made clear that yes, I would be doing this training for students and supervisors, but there would be no payment for this training. I sat back, tilted my head, then demuted myself and said, why would I do work for which I am not paid? Remuted myself. And that silence after I said that hung for about a minute, and they then were flustered and blustered and there was nothing really to say, so the meeting ended with no apparent resolution, nothing occurring, and I never heard from them again. That's story one. Here is story two from Canada. A student approached me online. I met her during the COVID event, the COVID period, and she approached me and asked if I'd be of some assistance to her candidature because she wasn't getting any supervision. And I do some research in an area close to her, so I said, look, I can help you with this bit of your thesis, and I'm very happy to read a final draft. So I went, yes, that's fine. And it was proposed that I gained adjunct status at this university. So cool, all going well, fine. It then got completely crazy. This university continually, when they wrote to me at my paid employment address, when they continually wrote to me, they spelt my name wrong and they couldn't organise an email address for the adjunct role. And then things started to get weird because I was getting these emails to my paid work email address, getting these emails asking me to fill in forms and sign off as principal supervisor. Now I was getting really confused and I wrote to the dean and said, what is going on here? And then suddenly a meeting appeared with the principal supervisor, another woman. And can I say, she was a professor, Canadian professor, and I was a professor and a dean when I talked to her. So this was another 30-minute meeting via Teams, and this woman professor spent 20 minutes of this meeting just telling the tale of how fantastic she is, what a great scholar she is, the profound successes she'd had, all her research. And once more, of course, there's very little there. There's not really anything there at all. She's egging up this narrative. And she made clear by the end of the academic narrative that because she was so remarkable, she was too busy to see her students more than once a semester. And therefore I would see her student, and it became clear maybe even students, I would see her student once a week and do all the administration for that student. Okay, now remember, I was a dean and professor working for another institution when this woman was making these statements at me. Now, I hadn't spoken through this entire meeting. I realised again, because this happened after the first gig I told you about, that I went, oh, right, here we are again. Okay, so I just was silent. And I then demuted after 20 minutes of this narrative, and I said, why am I doing your work for you that you're being paid to do? And she replied, oh, but you're my adjunct. You're my adjunct. And I said, no, I was approached by the graduate office for adjunct status. They're yet to spell my name correctly or deliver me an email address. So what are we actually doing here? Why would I be doing your work? And she became flustered and the call ended. Okay, so in all these cases, you'll notice these are women, and these are women constructing a narrative to make themselves feel powerful and justify the exploitation of others. So when I did not participate in this nonsense, when I refused to participate in this nonsense, I refused to present my academic show reel like it matters at all, I then therefore revealed the superficiality of their stories and of course the exploitation of others that undergirds them. There are reasons why this type of academic success story is gendered, that women have a tendency to do that. There's lots of reasons for that we may or may not talk about. But I want to return at the end of this Outrider to a couple of stories about men and these academic career narratives. So what's going on here? Okay, what is going on here? Let's work this out together. Let's do this. And this session is absolutely about you, and it's going to be some tough conversations we're going to have, but I hope this will be transformative for you centering yourself and feeling more confident in who you are. So let's get into some questions for you. What is the story that you tell yourself about yourself? What is the story that you tell other people about yourself? Right. Now, what's the difference between these two stories? Now, what exists in the space between these two stories can be the font for narcissism, exploitations, lies, and of course, anxiety. The key advice I always tell my PhD students and any PhD student around the world is please ignore the progress of others. Never compete with your fellow students. I ask students to visualize their candidature as a 400-meter run. You run one lap, right? And you are completely focused on your lane. Don't look about you. Don't focus what's going on in other people's lanes. I want you to speed up, get ahead, and get to that finishing line. Right. Now, the troubled students, the students that are lost in their candidatures, are the ones who blame other people. They blame their supervisors, they blame other students, they blame their parents, they blame their kids, they blame the university. Blame, 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 blame. And of course, what blame does is it blocks you from your success, because the last thing you're actually focusing on when you're dealing with other people and blaming other people, the last thing you're focusing on is yourself and your own accountabilities. So what's happening is your lane is being crowded with what all these other people should be doing. So today, let's think about you. Let's think about you. Think about the stories you are telling yourself and the stories that you are telling others. And think about how these stories are weaving into an academic narrative of success. And also be honest and recognize what you are leaving out of this story. Now, this is not going to be one of those yucky moments where some random bloke comes up to you and goes, "What's your story?" Like a sort of Tony Robbins thing. We ain't doing that, right? It's yucky, it's sleazy, it's disrespectful. We're not doing that. Instead, and this is, I suppose, one of the gifts about these videos, right, is that this is a very intimate, small, careful medium. We're having a quiet conversation, you and I, about your story and how that builds into an academic career narrative of integrity. What is your fuel? What is your engine? What is propelling your life? What is propelling your thesis? Now, I know these are very private matters because these are about your choices and your decisions, but you don't have to share them with anybody else. We're just having a moment, you and I, all right? I want you, with consciousness, to summon your story. And this story then can move from your private reflection into a public presentation of self. It also, can I say, really enables you to complete your PhD because it means you're writing your introduction and your conclusion in particular with honesty, with precision, and with meaning. Now, Maya Angelou asked that great question: ask for what you want and be prepared to get it. I think the greatest problem so many of us have had, and I had for decades, so I'm not going, I'm fantastic, I'm a random, I'm nobody. But what we all need to do is be clear about what we want. What does success look like for us? And speak those words. What does success look like? And then when it happens, we recognize it. Okay, so from here, if you don't work out what success is, if you're not honest with yourself at least about what these life stories are, then you start to fabricate, you start to configure fairy tales and imaginings, and you start to become a pretender in your own life. So today what I ask is, what is your story? And if that's too general for you, let's peel it back just a little bit and say, okay, what is your purpose? What is your purpose? Now, I often say in these Outriders, please don't be a guest star in your own life. Be a star in your own life. So today, to make that happen, tell me your story. All I ask is that you are truthful to yourself, that you're honest about your experiences, your expertise, you're authentic about your failures. So ask yourself, what gets you excited in the morning? What wakes you up? What makes you feel like you have a purpose on the planet? But further, what is of value to you? This is not the academic narrative of success. This is the most important story that you will ever tell, because this is the story that you're telling yourselves. And yes, you can change it. So if you're in one of those places in your life at the moment where the story in your head is, I'm stupid, I can't do this, I'm bad, I'm not able to do it, I'm a failure. If they're your stories, then you need to acknowledge them, because then we can change those stories. We, with authenticity, can make those stories more effective for you and more honest, because you are brilliant, you are fabulous, you are extraordinary, okay? And just because you fail doesn't mean that you're a failure. They're different, okay? So today we're going to cut away the clutter, the blame, the shame, the excuses, the weird stuff. We are focusing on you, because there are really 4 stories that we tell each other. We've got the academic story, the professional story, the personal story, and the life story. And each of them are different. For everybody, each of them are different. But what happens if we haven't led an authentic and an honest life is the separation of these stories starts to become untenable. We sort of can't control them, right? Because it means if there's a huge gap between all these stories, we are living a lie most of the time. And that's uncomfortable, it creates fear, creates anxiety. So consider your academic story, okay? Why did you enter a PhD? Why did you decide to do this program at this particular point? What is the role of a PhD in your intellectual development? You are a bright person. You wanted to commit to research. You wanted to commit to learning. Why? Where has this interest come from? Right, now this is important. Now, if other people have said, oh, you're right, oh, you're bright, you should do a PhD, or your mum's gone, oh, you're great, you should do a PhD, then that may explain some of the challenges that you're going through, imposter syndrome, blah, 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 blah. Because other people have told you how clever you are and you haven't owned that as an authentic story. So you really can't do a PhD for other people. It's too tough. You need to know, when you ask that question, why am I doing this? Why the hell am I doing this to myself? If the answer is, my mum likes me doing a PhD, that's not going to be enough for you. There's got to be some intrinsic value and depth to why you're putting yourself through this. So I need you to own your thesis. I need you to own your choices and own your decision. You decided to enroll in a PhD, full stop. So consider your story going into the PhD, consider your story now, and consider your story moving out of the PhD. The PhD is not a life's work. It is a punctuation point in your career narrative. Place the PhD in context of your life. It's not everything, it's a qualification. So start your story with, I was very successful as an undergraduate student, or I really enjoyed research in honours or in a capstone subject. I discovered a great passion for learning and research through my master's degree, or in my professional life, I discovered a problem that I really wanted to answer. Very common in clinical research. So wonderful. Hello to all my clinicians. You are very precious to me. So something happened in clinical practice and you said, I wonder why that happened. And that became the trigger for your PhD. Magnificent. So answer that question. Academically, what drew you into a PhD program? And then, what are you going to do with this PhD once you're finished? See how it becomes a narrative, it's got a story, it's got propulsion. This is the story that tells you how this degree will give you momentum and movement in your life. Keep the focus on you, your intelligence, and your achievements. So next is the professional story. This is important for all the big words in academic culture at the moment. So impact and engagement. That's all about the professional story. How are you going to use the PhD to further your career? Think about your research. Why does it matter? Who will be interested in it? Why will they be interested in it? Answer these questions. These are authentic questions and answers. That's the story about how your research will travel, impact and engagement. How are you going to take the insights from your PhD and arch beyond them? So start to shape that beautiful story for us as well. Remember, and I think this is so important for so many of the students I see in my office, that you must configure this professional story as your story. Don't compare it to anybody else. Your lane, your speed, your future. Then, of course, there is the personal story, and we needed these first two layers to get here. There are many personal reasons why you're here at this point in your life. It may be a social justice issue. You're doing this research because there is a social justice imperative that matters to you. You may be doing it because your family sacrificed so much to get you to a university. It may be you've sacrificed your whole life for other people. Hi. And this is your time. The PhD at this stage of your life is your reward for your enabling behaviour for all the other people in your life. You're precious. Thank you for all you've done. You're precious. Now, you may want to make your children, your parents, your friends proud. That's okay. You may want to be promoted in your job. All of that's important. But when you're configuring your personal story, it must be more than extrinsic motivation. So I'm doing this so I can get a better car, I get a pay rise, I can buy a new frock, right? I know we live in extrinsically motivated times, but there's got to be an intrinsic motivation there. To do a PhD, because it's so hard, it has to come from something deep. Curiosity, fascination, excitement for learning. And the final story that we're going to enact now is the life story. And you might have all sorts of mantras in your life. We all have those t-shirt slogans or mantras in our lives, train spotting light stuff, right? You are not your job, you are not your family, you're not your big screen television, you're not your car, right? Okay, so what we're trying to do here is take away all your easy socializations. So cut your family away, your job away, your qualification away. All that stuff's gone. So stripped back to your skin, your delicate skin. What is your story? What is the grammar that is the organizing pathway through your life? If you can work that out, it provides a really powerful foundation to claim your space, claim your lane, and complete that PhD for yourself on your own terms. No matter what the haters, the mongrels, the dreadful people, the abusers, the bullies, and there's tons of them in our culture, no matter what the mean girls say to you, hold on to this core. Now, some people describe this as core values. That's okay. I think that's become a bit of a cliche now. In many ways, it's deeper than values. This is your core. This is your core. This is the very foundation for your academic narrative. So for me, my life mantras have always been walk gently on the earth and then disappear. I've never been one of those people that legacy, look at me, after I died, walk gently on the earth and then disappear. Contribute each day in a positive way, don't be brutalizing, don't be cruel, but call out injustice every time, every single time. That's my story. Think about your foundational narrative and think about what happens in your life when people cross your path and they have different or dissonant core values. What are you going to do? How are you going to manage that difference? How are you going to stay in your lane and sit in the integrity of your story? Particularly now, we live in a culture where if someone can displace blame onto you, they will. Every single time. If someone can blame you for what's going on in their lives, they will. If someone wants to write a nasty email, they will CC it to the Vice-Chancellor. They will. They'll CC it to your boss. They will. That's the culture we're in. If someone's going to abuse you in a meeting or in a really nasty little email, they're going to do that. That's the culture that we currently live in, and we're not critiquing. So I activate a lot of different things in this dreadful culture. Now, silence is very important to me. Silence as refusal. I refuse to participate in your narrative. I refuse to participate in your exploitation of others. And silence, I think, is one of the most powerful critics that we have, to actively refuse to play in the game of others. So what silence gifts you is the capacity to get back in your lane and create space around you. So when people try and get in your face and put all their weird stuff on you, it may take you a couple of seconds because it's quite horrific when it happens. It's like, oh, wow, that hurt. Yeah. So I get that. So absorb it, take a breath, center yourself, and remember your stories. Remember your academic story, professional story, personal story, life story. Don't get pulled into other people's mess. You are the star of your own life. You are not the guest star of some other random's narrative. Seriously. Remember, the problem we've got in the higher education sector at the moment is it's being fueled by fear. Fear that people are going to be found out. And remember, a lot of these people are in leadership positions. So it creates incredible anxiety and fear. So we all, in this weird culture, we have to be calm and we have to center ourselves. Now, in a 3-year candidature for a PhD, in any 3-year period of our lives, something bad's going to happen. 3 years is a long time. Somebody is going to die, somebody is going to get sick, a relationship is going to break down, something serious is going to occur, you could be homeless, something terrible will happen. 3 years is a long time. Now, when good things happen, it's very pleasant. And people really like being around successful people, right? So, this is all very nice. But actually, we as humans, we are judged not in the good times. We're judged in the bad times. How we handle the horror, the fear, the confusion, the isolation, who we are as a human being is revealed in the times of crisis. So in these times, the stories that we've talked about today can evaporate. You can live in fear and get drawn into other people's stuff. We become brittle, we become confused, we become anxious, and we invent this sort of academic narrative that pushes us up because we're pushing other people down. There is an alternative. Acknowledge that something dreadful has occurred. Business as usual is not possible. So a relationship breaks up, somebody dies, something serious happens to a family member. And you know what? Business as usual is not possible. The PhD might be the least important thing in your life, and it probably is. So at that point, you have to make a decision. Don't let it drift. Either through the hard time, decide to connect with the PhD every day, or make a decision to put the PhD down and leave the program. Don't drift. Do something. And doing something always begins by recognizing in real time, if you can, the moment of break, the moment of rupture. Take a breath and work out with authenticity how you're going to get this train moving again. Create these stories of success by your definition of success: academic, life, professional, personal. Okay, and I want to finish this Outrider today by looking at the recent research in this area. And why I'm so cross, is that these books are supposedly teaching students, teaching academics how to be successful. Oh my goodness me. And the gift, I think, of these books, though, is they're a reminder of all the places in our lives that we construct this academic narrative, right? So in a signature block in emails, through Instagram selfies, little biography we write when we publish an article, right? All these are little versions of our academic success narrative, right? And I want to particularly acknowledge two books that are looking at these academic success narratives. Marian Mahat's Women Thriving in Academia, published by Emerald in 2021, and Lisa Ortiz-Villalel's Career Narratives and Academic Womanhood in the Spaces Provided. And that was published by Routledge in 2024. Right, now both of these books make for very uncomfortable reading, and I'll tell you why. Because both these books are teaching women how to fit in. The university sector that these researchers present is really nostalgic. It's an imagined higher education sector of possibilities and opportunities rather than exploitation and fear. If women can just write the correct story, their lives and their work will be appreciated. So supposedly this is about women prioritising their time and their networking and their narratives. If we can just find the right mentor, we are on our way, girlfriend. Okay, to provide one example of how weird this stuff is, I quote Elizabeth Hartnell Young's chapter in the Emerald book. And she states, quote, "Networking is not a dirty word, says all the women who get noticed." End of quote. And, quote, "Women often focus on perfecting their work to the detriment of career development." End of quote. Is getting noticed the point of academic life? The last thing international higher education needs is to educate another generation of pretenders, people who do not do the hard work required to have authentic success in teaching and learning and research, and just go on and on and on about how good they are. That's the last thing we need, my Lord. At a certain point, surely, the self-representation has to be authentic. It has to be meaningful. It has to be appropriate. Think about all the data sets that are available, Google Scholar, ORCID. There are hundreds of them that can triangulate data sets. Now, Emma Maguire in the Routledge collection, using Foucault, may the saints preserve us, stated, quote, "I began thinking about my anxiety around my track record gap," end of quote. Now, trust me, Foucault doesn't care too much about a track record gap. But, one way to stop feeling anxiety about a track record gap is to not have a track record gap. To actually every year make sure there is good, solid work produced. Then you don't have to spend your time thinking about anxiety. You spend your time on the work and the authenticity in the work. Now, I understand when times are tough, it's so much easier to edit a version of our professional lives that erases the failures, that erases the poor performance. And all of this has a goal. Two goals, really. The first goal is to create an impressive narrative. So you're an impressive person. But of course, when an impressive narrative is constructed, so is an oppressive narrative. To impress is to oppress. We see the consequences of academic leaders in our universities constructing and living this fairy tale of a career, not rendering their Google Scholar profile public so that their academic narrative is never tethered to actual facts. The question is, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about this? Now, none of these recent books talk about the resistive capacity of silence. Neither of these books talk about the importance of authentic ability and achievement. And they rarely talk about, in fact, they don't talk about what's behind leadership. What is the career, the actual career behind the supposed leaders in our universities? What we're living at the moment is not authenticity or truth, but a capacity to mask, to edit, to marginalise, to remove uncomfortable details from our lives, to present this palatable narrative of success and development. Now, actually, there are some great ways to resist these pretenders in our universities. First is to deploy silence as resistance. There's no doubt about that. So when they start this stuff, don't participate. So when they start their narrative, don't you replicate it. Don't you mirror it back. Don't you validate that behaviour. Don't you be a guest star in their lives. You be quiet. Make it uncomfortable. Yeah. And secondly, the great gift, the great way to end this problem is to speak of our failures. Speak of our failures. Having the courage to speak of our failures when we know that the gift of failure is as a diagnostic. Failure is a diagnostic in our lives. It's where the transformational power exists. Transformation of the self is perpetuated through understanding failure, not speaking of success. So therefore, I wanted to finish with two stories, and they're two stories involving men. We started two stories with the women, so let's talk about the men. Now, the first story of men is just to repeat a statement that my late husband, Professor Steve Redhead, said to me a lot. And it's one of the guiding tropes in my life. Now, I met Steve when I was just 30. I was a senior lecturer, little bunny. And he was a very famous professor, very successful, changed knowledge, changed everything. But he was always, and for all the thousands of his students and friends around the world, you know what I'm talking about. He was always so honest about the mistakes and the failures, and he would share them so that other people didn't have to live through his failures. He took one for the team. And many of his maxims and statements have stayed with me, but there's one that really guides my life. The great scholars, the people who have actually changed knowledge, never talk about it. They let the work speak for itself. End of quote. I found that to be absolutely accurate and true. The great scholars, and there aren't many of them, the great scholars on the planet, never do this, never tell the tale, because the work speaks for itself. Great statement. And I believe that to be true. The problem we've got now is in operation, in an operational strategy, that's no longer working. And I'll tell you why. Most of the culture doesn't read. The reading rates of academic work, scholarly monographs, as of course the production of academic work is proliferating, the actual reading, particularly of scholarly monographs, is declining. So what we've got a bunch of people in our universities that don't read very much. So in the old days, you could give respect for the work done. Okay, so this person, fantastic, I've read your work, you're a legend, thank you very much, it's a privilege to be here, I've read your work, right? Now, respect is being given for the story that we tell, not the actual work that we've done. And I'll give you a final example for you to ponder in your life. And some of my best stories, those of you that have been with me, how many years now, team? 7 years, 8 years, my goodness me. Some of my best stories come from interviews, academic interviews, because they are weird things. Okay, so I was in an interview with an all-male panel. There was obviously a woman there. A vagina is required, so there was a woman there. She was, of course, the head of HR, so the HR person was the woman, and we had an all-male panel. Now, I, as a matter of courtesy, because I do this for everybody, respected the panel. I respect every scholar, and I read their career, I understood their work, and once more I was completely horrified that a group of people that were so senior in a university had done so little in their life. But still, let's park that for a moment. So into the interview I went, done all the prep on the people, done strategic plan, operational plan, vision statement, policies, procedures, got it, rockin', here we go. Question 1. Can you give us the narrative of your academic career? Question 1. Now, we all know what the handball first questions in an interview are like. Why have you applied for this job at this time? What's the role of this job in your career at this point? What drew you to apply for this particular position at this particular university? These sort of questions, right? So, why are you here, girlfriend? Tell us why you're here. Let's all relax. Why you're here. Now, this one was different. Can you tell us the narrative of your academic career? And can I say that's a new question for you to prepare? Okay. Now, I replied with, colleagues, you have a 72-page CV. You have a 10-page application, and there are thousands of websites and mentions of me and my work on the internet. Surely you don't want me in this interview to do a self-serving, delusional, narcissistic narrative, surely. The chair replied with, Tara, pretend we haven't read your CV because we haven't. I took a breath. It was a Zoom interview. Took a breath, looked at all the screens, took a moment, thanked them for their time, and I left the interview. Now, this was for a very senior academic post at an Australian university. And we really have some hard questions to ask of ourselves. Have we reached such a point in this claustropolitan university that interview panels can't be bothered reading a CV? They require an Instagram version with filters. You have to decide what is important to you, what sort of life you're going to live. Are you satisfied to live a life of networking, of spruiks and lies? Or will you make different choices? I wish you love, light and peace. Tea out.